And if it does become a tropical storm, its name will be Darby. It is moving to the west to northwest right now, and we will continue to watch it for you. It is moving away from Mexico, away from the Baja Peninsula, but it has the chance to become a tropical storm, and we'll keep you updated throughout the day.
Good morning. It's time now for Storm Watch, which is sponsored by Home Depot. Well, today some powerful thunderstorms could be developing over much of the country. And coming up in a few moments, we'll show you where those big thunderstorms may be developing. But right now, let's shift gears and we start talking about the tropics. It is time now for your tropical update. And so far, things are remaining relatively quiet across most of the Gulf of Mexico, the Caribbean, and across the Atlantic Basin. We are, however, tracking a few little weak tropical waves that continue to work their way westbound, but thus far nothing is really showing any signs of development. Currently across the Gulf of Mexico, it's kind of quiet for those of you planning on going boating or fishing this morning just off the coast of Texas. Meanwhile, there have been some showers developing across the northern Gulf, and a few more showers and thunderstorms too popping up way over the southern fringes of the Gulf of Mexico, mainly around the Bay of Campeche. But again, no organization is likely and no development will likely be taking place here either. So things still relatively quiet across the Gulf of Mexico. And for those of you planning a little getaway cruise or vacation across the Caribbean, here too it's not actually looking too bad. We have had a few clusters of showers though, well to the south of Cuba, some showers and thunderstorms too, well to the south of Puerto Rico, and a few more showers lined up along the coastal waters of Panama. Now basically the shower and thunderstorm activity that we're seeing this morning is in association with a tropical wave that continues to press westward. Again, we've had some activity to the south of Puerto Rico and some clouds and showers all the way southward over towards Trinidad and Tobago. Now, development is certainly not likely because we have some wind shear taking place across this area. Generally kind of a trough in this area, and we have a northwesterly flow. So the northwesterly winds are helping to inhibit tropical development. So again, overall, things are not looking too bad across the Caribbean. A little bit farther out towards the Atlantic Basin, kind of quiet across the central part of the Atlantic. But then we pick up another tropical wave just entering the picture, a fairly impressive tropical wave that continues to drift towards the west. A few more waves too rolling off the African coast. And look at this powerful wave right now just getting ready to emerge off the African coastline. Now it's still a little early in the season to seriously see any development taking place off of Africa. This is usually what we call the Cape Verde season, and that usually doesn't take place until August. So we're still a couple weeks too soon to see any serious development here. But nonetheless, we'll continue to track and monitor these tropical waves as they continue to propagate towards the west at about 10 to 15 miles per hour. Now, as we were mentioning, it's still rather quiet across most of the Atlantic basin, and rightly so. Typically, June and July are rather quiet months in the tropics. By the time we hit August, though, things start to get a lot more active, and especially by September the 10th, that does mark the peak of the hurricane season. Now, as we head over towards the eastern Pacific, though, things are getting more active here. In fact, this massive clouds that we're seeing out here off the coast of Mexico, that is a tropical depression. It's being classified as tropical depression 5E. So again, we have a tropical depression here. It is currently packing winds of 35 miles per hour, and it's moving towards the west-northwest. Now, the official forecast suggests that it will likely undergo a very slow, gradual strengthening throughout the day, and it will probably continue on that west-northwestward track. Now, as it continues to intensify, there is a chance that it could become a tropical storm later on today, and if it does become a tropical storm, it would be called Darby. Now, the good news with this system, though, is that it's still a long ways away from land. Here's the tip of Baja California. Here's the Mexican shoreline. So it is moving to the west-northwest. It continues to move away from land, and right now it's not threatening any land areas. Heading stateside, though, we have been seeing some big thunder showers and thunderstorms popping up this morning. Quite a bit of cloud cover this morning across Kansas and Missouri, and we've had some heavy soaking downpours too. Actually, some parts of Kansas since last night have picked up a whopping 3 to 4 inches of rain, so there could be some ponding on the roads and some serious problems developing there throughout the morning hours. Then we also see a low pressure area swirling just south of Hudson Bay. That will eventually swing in towards the northeast, and the combination of that upper level low and a stationary front that's draped across the region will be enough to kick off some heavier showers and thunderstorms. Now, there's a chance for some severe weather, in fact, over parts of the northeast, including those of you in Boston, Providence, New York City, Philly, and D.C. It's kind of quiet this morning, but by this afternoon and tonight, powerful thunderstorms could be threatening your area. Now, we're not really forecasting tornadoes today, but these thunderstorms have the capability of producing some hail, very gusty winds, and heavy downpours, so certainly be on the lookout for these big thunderstorms developing later on. Stay tuned. We'll check out the bad thunderstorms, though, popping up this morning, coming up in a moment.
After days of sweltering heat in parts of the Northeast, relief is on the way at a price. We'll tell you about a chance for storms next on Weather Center.
This program was sponsored by the Home Depot.
We have the how-to clinics where we show the customer how to do the project themselves.
After doing it for the first time, they feel a lot more comfortable with it.
They get involved, they get pumped, they take notes, they come to the Home Depot, they get the products, they're taught how to do it, and they go home and they do it, and they're like, wow, I did it, and the Home Depot showed me how.
I'm Marshall Cease, and it's 10 minutes before the top of the hour, and you know what that means. Tropical update time in Storm Watch. We also have some storms that are going to be developing this afternoon, some of which could be severe. I'll detail where those places are likely to be right after the tropical update with Dr. Steve Lyons. Steve?
Well, thanks, Marshall. We've got tropical depression in the eastern Pacific looking toward storm development here the next 12 hours. And we've got some interesting features in the Atlantic. Nothing really to worry about yet, but we'll talk about some of them right now. In the Gulf of Mexico, we've had a lot of scattered thunderstorms, but ill-organized. The winds are light and variable out in here, not too bad. A little bit stronger over here in the western Gulf of Mexico, but we'll see a lot of that disturbed weather out there the next 24 hours as an upper-level disturbances is keeping some of these thunderstorms going. In the Caribbean, we had seen an east-west band of thunderstorms the last 24 hours. That band is somewhat dissipated. Still some showers left here, and also a pretty good band moving right into the Central American coast right now. And right behind that, there's some pretty good winds. Some ship observations indicate 30 to 40 mile an hour wind gusts out in here. So it could be a little bit windy here as it approaches the Central America coast the next 12 hours. But no development is expected in here. The winds are all out of the east. The interesting thing is up in here we have this clearing out of weather with the subtropical air, and Florida looks fairly dry right now. Cuba, also Dominican Republic down in here, very clear. and the interface between that drier air and the tropical air is what produced this cloud band here. We also have some interesting things going out in the central Atlantic as well. We have been looking at this cloud swirl in the stratocumulus for the last 3 or 4 days. Here it is up here, and now it's interacting with an upper level disturbance, and you see some thunderstorms developing from it. And it's also amplifying a little bit. No development is expected from it, but this wave-like feature could continue to move toward the east, toward the west, and affect Florida or the southeast the next 72 hours or so. We'll have to keep an eye on that. Windward Islands, Leeward Islands, very beautiful this morning, nice weather. We've been talking about another feature out here, this low pressure center. It's still in there. We had seen it weaken a little bit to an open wave yesterday evening, and I think it's back to a weak low pressure center out there now. Still not doing too much. Some thunderstorms festering around in there. It's not moving too much either, so it's stationary well to the east of the islands. So nothing to worry about just yet. But we've seen a lot of activity coming off the African coast, and here comes another tropical wave, very deep thunderstorm activity. You can see it as these very cold cloud tops in orange and red, and a couple of other features out in here. They had a surge in the subtropical high, which is pushing air down, drier air down to the south and west, and that sort of pushed some of this thunderstorm activity to the south a little bit, but it'll come up and shoot around it. But no development is expected from it the next 24 hours. As we know, there aren't too many dots on the map here this time of year, and that's because if we look at our frequency distribution, we see that July is still relatively low. We're getting ready to crank up in the frequency distribution very soon, so be prepared. Now in the Pacific, the frequency distribution occurs earlier. August is the peak of the season there. We've been watching some features out in this very showery area here yesterday and talked about this feature here that's now become Tropical Depression 5E. And here it is here, and it's really developing very nicely. As a matter of fact, it's just below storm strength right now and could go to tropical storm within the next advisory period. You see, this feature right in here is not a band that's flowing in, but that's a cirrus band that's flowing out, which is good indication of development. So this system is heading to the west-northwest. Let's get the statistics on it. Here it is here as of 8 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time, 12.9 north, 113.3 west, about 715 miles south-southwest of Cabo San Lucas, and it's moving to the west-northwest at 10. No real effects on the coast. However, as it gets out here, the Hurricane Center is expecting it to reach a fairly strong tropical storm. If it does so, we could see some surf come up into Southern California in the next 4 or 5 days. Not huge surf, but a little bit. So we'll have to keep an eye on that for you the next 24 hours. Well, let's go back to Marshall and see what's going on across the country.
Thanks, Steve. We'll take a look at that thunderstorm map so you can see where you need to be alert.
Weather Channel.
All our tropical update with the Weather Channel's own Dr. Steve Lyons.
Well, thanks, Jeanette. It's time for our tropical update, and we've got some interesting weather out in the Pacific. Tropical storm Darby has formed, and we've got some interesting weather also in the Caribbean Sea, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. You can see here on our long loop satellite imagery a lot of thunderstorm activity, a lot of white stuff showing up on our infrared imagery here, especially in the Pacific. Darby's out here. We'll talk about it in just a minute. And also this disturbed weather in the Caribbean Sea is really flaring up and going to produce even more rain for Nicaragua and Honduras the next 24 hours. Well, let's zoom into the Gulf of Mexico and see what's going on there. First, we've had a ridge of high pressure out here, and that ridge is really keeping a lid on things, so to speak. We've had isolated thunderstorms. You can see those are starting to go away now. They're really in pretty good shape there. Now, down in the Caribbean, we had a straight line or linear area of thunderstorms, and embedded in that was a tropical wave that's come out of there. It's sitting over here in the extreme western Caribbean, sort of hugging the coast now. A lot of showers affecting Honduras and Nicaragua, and some of it moving up into the Belize area the next 6 to 12 hours. Some very strong winds out here in the central Caribbean this afternoon, seeing some winds of 25 to 30 miles an hour from some ships out there. So not very good conditions out there, but right now it looks like this system's going to move on shore, not have a chance to develop. But trough of low pressure associated with it may linger up into the northern Caribbean there and over the Yucatan the next day or so. We'll keep an eye on that for you. Now, out in the central Atlantic, we are watching a swirl of low clouds that we had tracked all the way across the Atlantic. It's still there. and there it is there. It's now interacting with an upper level trough of low pressure, and in that interaction it's flared up some thunderstorms that are fairly vigorous out there, but the shear above it is fairly strong, so we don't expect development from it the next 24 to 36 hours. But as it moves to the west, it may affect the Caribbean, the Bahama Islands with some showers in about 24 to 36 hours. Now, we've been monitoring a lot of thunderstorm activity off the African coast associated with a couple of waves and a low pressure system out here that's become rather stationary. But in the last 12 hours, we've seen a very big area of thunderstorms come off the coast, a very nice tropical wave. As a matter of fact, in the latest observations, we have a surface low pressure center that's sitting just to the north of this convection and just to the in between the African coast and the Cape Verde Islands here. So this is probably our best looking tropical wave yet this year. Convection-wise, we'll see what happens there. Hopefully we'll get under some shear later on and not have to worry about it as it moves to the west. But keep in mind, this time of year, we're usually fairly low on tropical cyclone development. It starts to ramp up into August. So that part of the Atlantic basin is not typically an area where we expect development. Well, as we go out into the Pacific Ocean, as I mentioned earlier, we have Tropical Storm Darby. There it is there. It's moving to the west-northwest, and it has some pretty good outflow on the top of it, a big anticyclone over the top. You can see this is high cirrus cloud moving anticyclonically or clockwise over the top of the system, while the low-level flow is spiraling in toward the center. And let's get the statistics on Darby now. We see it here at 13.3 north and 114.4 west. It's 45 miles per hour right now and moving to the west-northwest at 13 miles an hour. That's away from land. We expect that track to continue the next 24 to 48 hours. Some intensification is possible, and it may become Hurricane Darby in the next day or so. We'll keep an eye on it. It looks like it's moving away from land, and the main impact would be basically ocean swell that will affect Mexico and maybe Southern California in the next day or two. We'll keep an eye on that. And we can see here on the infrared satellite imagery a very nice picture of what it looks like there. And some deep bands of thunderstorms, but really harmless to the coastline at this time. Well, let's see what Janetta has going across the country for severe weather-wise.
All right, thanks so much, Steve. We check out the current weather map. We'll show you our frontal boundary right here across the middle of the nation. Moving on towards the northeast, it's separating that colder, drier air from the warm, moist air heading up out of the Gulf of Mexico. So that clash zone creating that possibility for severe weather. And there you have it, our possibilities right out ahead of the frontal boundary. We've already seen some intensity with the thunderstorms across the northeast, a lot of lightning, some trees down, power lines down in Massachusetts, and even some reports of possible tornadoes earlier today. We have a severe thunderstorm watch in effect until 7 o'clock local time. That means that conditions are favorable for the more large hail, strong winds, and heavy downpours. Notice one round of rain has already moved on through, and now more showers and thunder showers are starting to develop. So we'll have to watch closely what happens as it heads on over towards Hartford again and just north of Philly. What else is happening across the country? Well, we have a big heat wave on our hands. We'll talk more about that next.
We're tracking several areas of potentially heavy rain, including storms moving through the northeast. The latest on the weather that affects you just ahead on Weather Center.
Get one thing done, and it's already time to worry about doing it again. Want to make at least something around the house worry-proof? With Thompson's Premium Deck Stain, you can. It not only tested #1 in waterproofing, it resists fading from the sun and prevents mildew discoloration. No matter what you need to stain around the house, get complete protection with Thompson's. Thompson's. It's worry-proof.
Heard the news about Cheerios? A new study